Hi, I'm Nadine Aisha-Jassett and welcome to this video from the National Library of Scotland's Fresh Ink Initiative, where 10 emerging writers create and share new work on their experiences of 2020. Candice Purwin is a writer and illustrator making comics in Edinburgh. Her work documents everything from social and political movements to the changing of the seasons, finding the human stories and tiny creatures which bind these great tectonic shifts together. Candice's piece, A Year in the Book Fort, tells the story of 2020 through library books, and it is, in a word, phenomenal, as it captures moments both personal and national in 2020. Candice entwines her experiences with the books she reads, the author's worlds sucking her in, mirroring the way Candice's art captures us as the reader too. Here's Candice reading an extract from A Year in the Book Fort.
Hello, my name's Candice Purwin. I've written a comic, so we'll be sharing some images with you, and it's called 2020. January, week 1, we were 8 years in power, Tanisi Coates. I borrowed this book from my brother over Christmas. I cribbed notes from the bounty of footnotes and references. Bring it back next time we're down, I promise. But there is no next time. Week 2, freshwater, Akwaeki and Metsi. January, the hopeful unknown. Metsi tells me stories of dualities and internal multitudes, gender and mental health richly rooted in Igbo cosmology. Week 3, apple and knife, Intam Paramedita. But what is this pneumonia of unknown origin in Wuhan, China? Memes condemning wet markets, but I can't hear the noise of the dark, dirty feminist fairy tales being whispered in my ear. Week 4, Warlight, Michael Ondaatje. And don't forget the wildfires ravaging Australia, as yellow as the warlight falling on the muzzle of a sleeping stolen greyhound. Week 5, Mindfuck, Christopher Wiley. Still reeling from last December's Tory majority, this is a difficult read. Patriarchal, white supremacist capitalist energies manipulating us through data harvesting, social media corrals, and weaponized rage. We must take back the internet, Wiley insists. Under Boris Johnson's smug, gurning face, we leave the EU, and then the WHO declares a global health emergency. May. A kind of pressure is building. I follow Reshi on his glorious voyage across America as a hustler in the 50s and 60s. Week 21, Song of Solomon, Toni Morrison. A little bit of work comes in. I revel in Morrison's prose, so rich in signs and wonders and finely drawn characters. She makes African-American history feel like classical myths, violent and lyrical and older than time. Week 22, Fever Dream, Samantha Schweblin. A horror folk fable which merges indigenous wisdom with an ecological nightmare. Meanwhile, the sky over the city is the clearest I've ever seen it. Week 23, To the Lighthouse, Virginia Woolf. The New York Times runs a cover dense with the names of the dead. I read the first of this year's studies in grief. Woolf's narrative rushes in, the noise and energy of a crashing wave, then withdraws suddenly, and I am bereft. On the 25th of May, Officer Derek Chauvin kneels on George Floyd's neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I can't breathe, he wheezes. People record the act of brutality while begging the officers to get off him. George Floyd dies. George Floyd is murdered. A powder keg ignites. We learn their names. July. Week 28, the year of magical thinking, Joan Didion. The curve has been flattened because we all stayed inside. The restrictions begin to ease. In this year of grief, this next study is a deep black cavern of despair, made worse by knowing before she does that Didion's next book will be Blue Nights. Week 29, Ruby Fruit Jungle, Rita Mae Brown. It's hard to stay mired in sadness though, with Brown leading you enthusiastically from the sticks to the city, celebrating art and sex and being alive. Week 30, Sister Outsider, Audre Lorde. I keep rewriting this panel, because every time I try to express how much these essays meant to me, it sounds tired and trite. Lorde was a great teacher, a great poet, and a great thinker. She was angry, yes, but her work is rooted in love and feels more alive now than a lot of contemporary writing. Week 31, The Fire Next Time, James Baldwin. This is another panel I've tripped over several times because it feels obvious to say Baldwin's essays are powerful and eloquent, tempered by the rage of being in the midst of the civil rights movement. It is not only a call to arms, but also a warning about the fault lines along which we might be divided. Week 32, Are Prisons Obsolete? Angela Y. Davis. Davis cites prisons as places of state-sanctioned violence and trauma, which predominantly target those oppressed by racism, capitalism, and ableism. If the pandemic is a portal through which we might manifest social change, alternatives to the prison industrial complex is a great place to start. Amidst the excitement of social unrest and the anxiety of the ongoing pandemic, I managed to steal some human moments, but there's definitely the feeling that we're all enjoying these small freedoms on borrowed time. October, week 41, Lovecraft Country, Matt Ruff. My computer decided pretty early on in the pandemic times that it was no longer going to stream anything or Zoom anyone. In an attempt to keep up with the zeitgeist, grandma style, I pick up Lovecraft Country, recently adapted for TV by Jordan Peele, on one of my last library trips. Week 42, The Binding, Bridget Collins. An eternal sunshine premise, a little witching and crafting, a world in which your memories can be bound into books to be locked away, lost, stolen, or sold. The erasing and repurposing of memory might be what 2020 is doing to my brain. Week 43, You Can't Keep a Good Woman Down, Alice Walker. While this whole collection of short stories is brilliant, third Elvis Presley stayed with me. She manages to write both a fierce indictment of Black women's erasure from American music history and a tender study of an unlikely friendship. Week 44, The Bass Rock, Evie Wyld. Violence against women. As deeply entrenched and immovable as that pulled tooth of a rock brooding off the coast of North Berwick, this book palpitates with strange and sudden surges of animalistic male violence, balanced precariously with the power of awkward, imperfect, unbreakable female allyship. It is important to note how domestic violence, already epidemic, has increased during the pandemic. I make one last excursion into my George IV Bridge sanctum before it closes again. Digital borrowing has saved my life this year, but there is nothing like the smell, serendipity, and dust motes of an actual library, and I'm little afraid some of them won't reopen. December. Week 49, The Five, Hallie Rubenhold. 5 women finally get their stories told beyond the man who killed them. It is really a study of how terrible it was to be a poor woman in 19th century London. The slow source decay of aging, poverty, perhaps struggling with addiction in the late 1800s. Here in the present, the UK death toll surpasses 75,000. How? Week 50, Scabby Queen, Kirsten Innes. A lifetime on the trouble edges of activism and industry and art in pre- and post-millennium Britain. The slow source decay of aging, poverty, and struggling with mental health. Then 90-year-old Margaret Keenan is the first person to be vaccinated. Week 51, Salt Slow, Julie Armfield. Beginning at the place where your sleep leaves you and ending in the vast waters of a world sunk under the ocean, fighting mutant sea creatures. It is easy to join these stories in the apocalypse lifeboat as the world continues to contract. Week 52, An Unkindness of Ghosts, Rivers Solomon. A narrative led by neurodivergent, gender non-conforming people of colour warns me how these violent patriarchal hierarchies will destroy us all repeatedly while the world heals without us. This year I wept over shambolic reactionary governments who will gaslight us into 2021 and 100,000 unnecessary deaths. This year I loved grassroots protest, the creative work which somehow found me, the moments we imagined new worlds, and of course the books. On Christmas morning, I cycled to the top of a big hill. I watched that tangerine cinnamon sunrise as new light creeps from the horizon to the fourth. Goodbye 2020. I hope we learned all the things you tried to teach us.